Thank you. This will be Thursday, May 21st, 4th period, regular class, as we're going to do the talking about the end of That Was Then, This Is Now. We have the Charger Challenge coming after school. Hopefully I get to post tonight that we won, because we're awesome and didn't get swept this year, but fingers crossed, we'll see what happens. Test tomorrow over the end of the book. You can find the book on my website, or you can borrow a book from me, but if you're watching this at home, it's not going to do you much good to borrow it from me, because you're already home. Did that and that. All right.
She has a question.
I know. I'll get to her eventually. We're going to go through and talk about the ending little bits of the book. I want to talk about the scene with Eminem, then the scene between Brian and Mark, and then the scene at the very end of it. Before I get to her question, the scene with Eminem will be on page 136. Blue, what's up?
I don't want to talk to you now.
Okay, problem solved. On page 136, they end up finding out where Eminem is. And where is Eminem?
At the little hippie house.
At the hippie house. And they go to the hippie house to go find him between Brian and Kathy. And the state that he's in is something we're going to get into. Steven?
I want to listen to this. Can I go to this bio?
Sure. What they're going to deal with coming up with him is they're going to talk about him being on LSD and acid and the fact that he's tripping. They talked about being high, and I'll need your book though, unless you bring it back at the very end, because I'll need that for my next class period. They talk about being high, they talk about flying and floating and stuff like that. The problem is, LSD, the drug, is pretty strong with what it does. And what LSD does is it makes you hallucinate. And you can either have good hallucinations or bad hallucinations. The reason people take the drug is for the good hallucinations part. And it can make you experience things that you would not normally be able to experience in life. It allows you to see things that would not be there. You can take LSD, and then if you're sitting in your room and you have stuffed animals everywhere, your stuffed animals can begin talking to you. Aww. And when they begin talking to you, you will see them just like in the movie Ted, where it's an actual animal, and you'll have a conversation. What the problem is that your brain fully believes that this thing is actually happening. When you're having a conversation with them, it is as if they are actually there. But you can also imagine things that are there that are not there at all. So all of a sudden, you could have a giant teddy bear walk into your room. And when that giant teddy bear walks into your room, you will imagine it is a real thing that you can interact with. As far as like being able to touch it. If it were to come over and hit you, you would feel it. If it were to come over and bite you, you would feel it. The reason being, LSD goes and interacts with your brainstem and your spinal cord, which is what basically makes you see and hear and feel and everything that goes through your five senses. So when it interacts and makes you hallucinate, let's back up. If I were to go over here and just touch Ogawa on the head, how does he know I'm touching him on the head? You feel it. Or he can see my hand coming down on top of his head. So your brain goes, oh, I can see him, I can feel it. Well, the trick is with LSD, when the giant fake teddy bear touches you, your brain tells you you're feeling it and you're seeing it, so it becomes very real.
Fun.
The problem becomes when you start getting scary stuff, because you can't control what your brain sees. So all of a sudden, your giant friendly teddy bear that you're having a good conversation with and playing tic-tac-toe, all of a sudden the teddy bear rips off the head, and there's a giant flaming skull there, and it decides to start chewing on your leg. And you're like, you're not real. And it goes, yes, I am. And it goes over there and starts biting on you. You can feel the bite marks on your arm. And then all of a sudden, it'll bite off your hand, and you'll look down, and your hand is gone. And it kind of freaks you out, because your brain makes you not see your hand. And so that's where people start having bad trips. They start freaking out. They try to jump out windows. They try to run into traffic, because you'll see things that aren't there. It's like me trying to convince you that Tommy's not sitting there. You're like, oh, I see him. I'm like, that's an empty chair. I'm like, no, he's still there. And you go, you're like, I'm touching him. Like, dude, you're touching thin air. And so how do you convince someone that something they're seeing is not really there? That's what happens with LSD. The problem is, it can really mess with your brain, because it becomes a permanent thing where it readjusts all the wiring in there. Where even after you stop taking the drug, your brain can still keep seeing things. That's what happens to Eminem coming up. So this whole big scene with him, he's taken it, and it's really messed with his brain. So keep that in mind as we come up to him. All right, now to 136, where it says, this is where he is? Kathy sighed, back at the hippie house. I still can hardly believe that baby's living in a place like this. I guess big sisters always think of little brothers as babies, no matter how old they are. Maybe it was good for him. Maybe being on his own made him grow up a little. I only half believe this. I'd always had a good opinion of Eminem's mind, but being smart ain't being mature, as I've often proved. Anyway, we can't be sure he even wants to come home with us. If he doesn't, Daddy's going to call the cops and have them bring him home. He doesn't want to, but he keeps saying Eminem has had his fling, and it's time he came home. This is my only chance to get him home without dragging the police into it. I didn't know that. Well, let's hope he comes with us. Maybe I could slug him and carry him home. Kathy laughed. No, let the cops do it if it comes to that. I'd rather him hate the police than you. We walked up to the house. There were kids on the porch, just watching the street. I stopped to talk with a biblical-looking guy. Biblical meaning he has long beard like Jesus and long hair like Jesus, because Jesus is from the Bible. I'm looking for Baby Freak. He around? Yeah, he is. The guy was staring directly into my eyes. He had friendly, trusting eyes. Are you a friend of his? Yeah, a good friend. This is his sister? Kathy gave him the big smile she won me with. The guy smiled back. He's upstairs, I think. Suddenly the guy looked worried. He's been floating for a couple of days now. Oh, no kidding, I said, keeping my cool, and Kathy followed my example. Talk to his travel agent, the hippie said. He's the cat with the red hair inside. Floating means? Hi. Travel agent?
They're a supplier.
The dealer.
The dealer, the guy who gives you the stuff to get you high. His travel agents send you on planes. Planes go high. Really witty stuff. So your travel agent is the guy that deals the drugs. Travel agent? Well, what's that? Kathy whispered as we went in. I didn't want to tell her. Didn't want her to feel the sudden cold waves of fear that I was feeling. So I said, I don't know. We found out who we were looking for. A big, heavy guy with fire-colored hair, beard, and mustache. We're looking for Baby Freak, I said. I was beginning to see why Eminem had acquired this other nickname. Most of the kids there were at least 17 or 18, with a lot of college-age kids. It was a real crowded place, but now I can't remember what everyone was doing. At least some of the kids were smoking grass. You could tell that by the smell. I was hoping the place didn't get raided while we were there. You can get busted just for being at a place where people are smoking pot. Yeah? Man, that kid's on a bad trip. Kathy made a funny yelping little sound. Trip meaning being high on LSD was called a trip. Some of these freaks have been dropping acid. Baby wanted to try it, so I sat with them. Bad trip, man. Really bad. He's calmed down now a little, but all day, today some of these other cats been holding him and keeping him from jumping out the window. I felt like I was going to throw up. Kathy was as white as a sheet. Can we see him? She said in a tiny, expressionless voice. Sure. We followed him up the stairs. He led us to the same room Mark and I had gone to the last time we were there. This time, no one was there except the blonde chick, who was curled up on the bed asleep, and someone huddled in the corner. To my surprise, Red walked over to the huddle. Hey, man, there's people here to see you. Are they spiders? The person didn't raise his head, but the voice was Eminem's. Nah, man, they're squares. Squares was slang for someone who doesn't do drugs. If you're square, then you're not cool. You're someone who's like all normal and stuff. Like losers are normal. Eminem looked up, and I hardly recognized him. His hair was to his shoulders. He was a lot thinner. He was dirty, and the expression on his face was one I'd never seen on him before. Suspicion. Eminem, baby? It's me, Kathy. Kathy kneeled down in front of him. He was staring at her, not seeing her. Square spiders? He said, and his face was contorted in fear. I don't want to see any spiders. It's me, Kathy, your sister. Don't you want to go home? I went to my stomach, Eminem said in a high, unnatural voice. He was talking too fast. I went down into my stomach, and all these spiders came out. I never knew there were spiders in my stomach. I was there 10 years, and all that time these spiders kept chewing on me. They were big spiders. Kathy choked back a sob. Baby, what have you done to yourself? He seemed to see her. Kathy? I screamed and screamed and screamed, but nobody came to help. But then an 8th grader came in, and it was all okay. Thanks, 8th grader.
You're welcome.
I kept trying to get back, but the spiders held me down and chewed on me, and the colors went in and out. And I listened to the colors, and they were screaming too. Red and yellow screamed loudest, and the spiders were eating them too. He kept trying to jump out the window. All day. We took turns holding him down. What'd the guy want? A medal? He'd given him the stuff in the first place. Kathy, we don't take him to the hospital. She looked at me quickly. Hospital? Then she nodded. Let me call Daddy first. She looked at Red. Do you have a phone I can use? And she followed him out of the room. There was this other color? Eminem said to me seriously, but half afraid, as if he thought I'd turn into a spider any minute. I don't know its name. It told me, but I forgot. It said I was being paid back for all the carrots I ate. I didn't know. I didn't know about the carrots before. I don't think it was my fault. He was crying. Tears were pouring down his face, but he hadn't changed his expression. He looked so thin and scared, not a bit like the Eminem I knew. Do you think I should be paid back for something I didn't know about? No, I said, clearing my throat. I don't think it was your fault. I put my arm around him and held him. He was shaking real bad. Kathy came back. Daddy's going to meet us at the hospital. Can you carry him? Yeah. I picked him up easily. He couldn't have weighed more than 90 pounds. I'm so tired. I was gone so long, and I didn't have any sleep. I carried him down the stairs out of that house. Nobody made any move to stop me. Nobody seemed to care. Kathy drove us to the hospital. Halfway there, Eminem started suddenly and screamed, Where am I? It's okay, kid. You're going to be okay. Where am I? Why don't I know where I am? I was just sick. I didn't know how Kathy was managing to drive the car. I never felt so bad before. I just held on to Eminem. There wasn't any sense in trying to talk to him. I felt then that he was as much my little brother as Kathy's. That's how bad I felt. All right, I'm going to stop there. With the whole spider thing, that was a common thing that happens with LSD. The problems being is, have you ever had that sensation where you feel like there's a bug on you and you get like a little thing on your arm, like you look around and there's nothing there? The problem is with LSD, it fills that in. So when you get that little feeling, you get that little twitch, you're like, ugh, and you look down, your brain will make you see something there. It'll make you see a bug or a spider on your skin. But the problem is, it's not actually there. So you freak out, and as bugs do, you slap it, try to make it go away. But then, of course, when you slap your arm, now your arm hurts, and your body's like, oh, pain. So your brain will oftentimes let the bug go inside your skin. And you'll see all of a sudden the bug burrow in. And then you're starting to freak out because then you're looking at your arm, and you can see the bugs, and they're moving through your skin. Now, it's not actually moving, but that's your brain showing you these things. That's the hallucination. So how do you get the bug out of your skin?
Control.
And that's when people start having problems. Because then people start getting knives and they start cutting open their arms, not to try and commit suicide, but because they're trying to get the bugs out that they can see. And that's where the issues happen. So with Eminem seeing the spiders, that was a common problem. People would start to see insects and start to freak out, and that's where he's having the problem here. The spiders are attacking him. So anytime you get like those little random phantom pains, the LSD would sort of fill it in. Brian, freaking out right now because he loves Eminem. I'm like, it's almost like his little brother. He feels really connected to him. He's really, really angry. He blames somebody for this because who's he going to blame?
The red-headed guy.
Yeah, the drug dealers, the hippies, because he feels they're responsible for Eminem being this way. If they hadn't given him drugs, then there wouldn't be a problem. The issue is he wants to get revenge because he wants to pay somebody back for all of this. But he's already tried beating up hippies once, and that didn't really work. He's not sure what to do, and he feels really sad, and he's really upset, and he's really angry, and he wants to do something about it. But when he gets home, that's where we get to our next big issue. So I'm going to jump a couple pages. I'm going to skip the part where we're in the hospital. We find out that basically Eminem messed up for life. One of the drawbacks of some of the drugs you can do, like LSD being one of them, is that it can have permanent effects on you. And what LSD can do is it basically can cause brain damage, which is what happens to Eminem. He goes from being a genius to being brain damaged from this drug and interacting with his spinal cord. And the fact that it also makes him sterile, meaning that he can never have kids again. Because if he does, he has a chance of them being deformed and stuff like that. And from the very beginning, how many kids did he want to have?
A lot.
Yeah, like 9 or 10. Now, he can't have any of them. So that's what they find out, how messed up it is. Brian takes that, heads home, is tired, had a long day, feels really upset, and then discovers something that causes him to make a really, really poor choice. So I'm going to jump to page 144, and this is as Brian has gotten home from after having Eminem and Kathy at the hospital. I was surprised to see how late it was when I got home. Mom was asleep. I went into my room, lay down without bothering to turn off the light. Mark wasn't home yet. I was tired. I felt empty, drained. Nothing can wear you out like caring about people. I was tired, yet I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. I closed my eyes, but I kept seeing pictures. All these people were spinning around in my head. Mark and Charlie and Mike and Angela, Kathy and Eminem and Mr. Carlson and Tim and Curly Shepherd. Life seemed so simple once. Now, it suddenly seems so complicated. I can remember a time when my only worry had been paying Charlie the $3 I owed him. Things used to be simple, and now they weren't. I wanted a cigarette bad. I half-heartedly searched my pockets, but I knew I didn't have any. Then I remembered Mark's spare carton and rolled off the bed and reached under his mattress. I felt something strange and pulled it out. It was a long cylinder-like thing. I unscrewed one end, and all these pills came rolling out. I'm not dumb by any means. I've never used drugs, except for a couple of tries with grass, but I knew what they looked like. I looked at this bunch of pills. There were hundreds of them, and it was like a machine in my head went click, 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 and it came up with an answer I didn't want. Mark was selling this stuff. This was way too many pills for anybody to have if he was just taking them himself. And besides, I would have noticed something different about Mark if he'd been taking them. You can't use drugs and not show it. I knew too many kids who were users not to know that. Mark was selling. Mark was a pusher. That was where he was getting his money. That was why he'd known about the hippie house. That was why they had known him. That was why he had known where to look for Eminem. Eminem. Kathy. Eminem was in the hospital. Maybe he was messed up for life. And Mark was selling the stuff that made him that way? Okay, maybe this wasn't LSD, but it was a step in that direction. And God only knows what all Mark had been selling. I thought about that blonde, dead-looking chick, and about Eminem screaming about spiders, and about Kathy half hysterical with grief. I thought about Mr. Carlson and the bitter doctor, and the whole mess was swirling around in my head, and it felt like it would burst wide open. When I thought about the cause of all this misery, I became very cool, and I very calmly called the cops. Eminem had lost his mind, and Kathy was hurting, and I did something about it. Then I sat down on a chair in the front room and waited. It seemed only a minute later when Mark came in. "Hey, you still up?" he said. Then he stopped. "What's the matter?" "Brian, you look awful. What is it?" I held out the cylinder. "Oh," Mark said after a pause. "You found him, huh? Ah, don't worry, buddy. I don't take him. I have a good enough time like I am." "Just how are you anyway?" "What?" "Eminem's in the hospital. Acid trip. They think he may have lost his mind." "Oh, man, that's awful. That poor kid." Then he looked at me. "Brian, don't look like that. I said I don't take him. Come on, don't you believe me?" "I believe you. We needed the money, you know. I tried getting a job. With my police record, nobody'd hire me. I met this guy on the ribbon. He set me up. I figured I don't have to take it to sell it, so what's the worry?" "Eminem," I began. But I was too tired, too numb to talk. "Is that what's bugging you? Listen, I didn't sell Eminem anything. He got it from somebody else. Look at Brian. They're going to get it from somebody if they want it, so why can't I make some money? I never forced it on anybody. I never tried to talk somebody into using drugs so I could make a buck." He could have talked all night. I wouldn't have changed my mind. This was wrong. For the first time in years, I thought about the golden-eyed cowboy who'd been Mark's father. Was Mark a throwback? To what? I wondered tiredly why I'd never seen it before. Mark had absolutely no concept of what was right and what was wrong. He didn't obey any laws because he couldn't see that there were any. Laws, right and wrong, they didn't matter to Mark because they were just words. "Brian, what is it?" Mark cried suddenly. "Listen, if it bugs you that much, I'll quit. I'll stop selling if you don't like it." "Shoot, I never thought it'd bother you. I mean, I sort of thought you knew about it." "Don't drag me into this," I thought. "Don't try to make me out to be blind just because you are." Aloud, I said, "I called the cops." And I felt as if I was talking in my sleep. Mark went white. "What?" he said softly, disbelieving. "What'd you say?" We could already hear the siren. "Brian, you know what something like this would do to me with my record. Brian, tell me you're lying." Mark was pleading, desperately. I thought maybe he'd run for it, but he didn't. He just sat down in a chair opposite me. He was white, and his eyes were black with a rim of gold around them. He looked the way he had when he'd been clobbered with that bottle. "Brian?" he said quietly, like he was trying hard to understand, like he was totally confused, like he thought maybe I would answer in a foreign language. "Oh, why are you doing this to me, buddy? Brian, just tell me." I couldn't tell him. I didn't know. The police arrived, and of course Mom woke up. She didn't know what was going on. She could only stand helpless in the kitchen doorway while the police questioned me, rounded up the drugs, slapped handcuffs on Mark. They advised Mark of his right to remain silent, and he did. He just stood there, quivering, watching me while I told the cops the things that would put him behind bars for years. Then a cop said, "Let's go, kid." And it seemed to dawn on Mark what was happening. He looked quickly from the cops to me and cried, "My God, Brian! You're not going to let them take me to jail!" Didn't he know I had just put him there? The cop jerked Mark around and shoved him out the door. Suddenly, it was deadly quiet, just the distant siren and Mom's quiet sobbing. I went into the bathroom and threw up. I was sick. When I told you this was the book I remember making me cry, that was the scene that did it for me. Because I read the book, I was a fast reader as a kid, but I read pretty much the book like all in one sitting, from the whole thing going on with Eminem, and then going from there into that scene. And the reason it made me cry was the fact that I could see what happened there very easily happening to me and my friends. I read this book when I was in 8th grade as opposed to 7th grade. And I had friends in 8th grade who did drugs, and I wasn't an idiot. I didn't do drugs in 8th grade, but I was friends with ones who were, and I knew they had horrible home lives. And seeing that scene, I realized both of the people, both Mark and Brian, have good intentions. Neither one of them is trying to do anything evil. Look at Mark. Mark's parents killed each other. He's taken in by another family, and they're poor, and they don't have money, and they're having a hard time getting by. And he wants to do everything he can to try and help them out. But he can't get a job because he's had a bad past and the fact that he's been arrested. There's only one way he can make money that he sees to help these people. And what's the one way he can do to make money?
Sell drugs.
Sell drugs. He doesn't take drugs himself. He doesn't push drugs on anyone. He simply does it as a way to try and help his family make money. His way of trying to support them. If you were a parent and you had a child that was starving, would you steal bread from a store to feed them? Sure. Or would you let your child die? That's the choice that Mark's sitting with. Yeah, doing it's wrong, but so is not supporting your family. So is letting your child die of starvation. It's a tough choice for Mark. But for Brian, we teach you, if you know someone who is selling drugs, you turn them in. You turn in drug dealers. It's what you do. So how do you yell at Brian? Brian's trying to make the world a better place. Both of them are trying to do the right thing, and both of them end up doing the wrong thing and destroying both of their lives in the process. That's what hit me when I read this. The fact that I saw this same things happening to me and my friends, and it hit me pretty strongly at the time. You can just put it right over there, kiddo. And so then, to jump forward, before I get to my talk, I want to read the very end of it, the scene between Mark and Brian, where they meet with each other. But to rewind a little bit, at the very end of chapter 2, with the Mike and Connie thing, you remember, Connie has her brothers beat up Mike when he gets dropped off, and she cries the entire time because she feels horribly guilty. Brian does the same thing. What does Brian do as soon as he turns in Mark?
He throws up.
Throws up. Guilt. He feels awful. He knows what he just did is wrong, but at the same time, it was right. Same thing that happened to Connie. To jump back to page 42 for a quick second, which was the very end of chapter 2, when we find out that Brian says, I can easily forgive the people that hurt me because that's how life goes, which Brian does later on with the shepherds when they beat him up and he forgives them. Mark doesn't feel that way. On 42, Mark's reaction is, yeah, I mean it. Man, if anybody ever hurt me like that, I'd hate them for the rest of my life. I don't think much about that statement then, but later I would. I still do. I think about it and think about it until I think I'm going crazy. Referring to that decision that Brian makes at the very end. Then to jump to the very end, on page 156, back to both, 157, he goes to visit Mark in jail after putting him there. And it was that final scene also, knowing what kind of person Mark was, and the fact that Mark had a good heart, but seeing who Mark becomes at the very end because of Brian's good choice, that's what hit me also. So I'm going to read that last scene between the two of them on page 156, or 157, sorry. Finally, at the end of August, I got to see Mark. He couldn't leave the reformatory, so I had to go in. He'd been in so much trouble that the authorities considered my visit a last-ditch effort to straighten him out. If it didn't work, they were going to send him to the state prison. They told me they hoped I could influence him. They didn't say how. I thought we'd have to talk through a wire dealie, like you see in prison movies, but instead, we were left alone in a room, which I remember as strangely empty. "Hiya, buddy," Mark greeted me. "Slumming?" I couldn't speak. I had a real bad pain in my throat. Mark had changed. He'd lost a lot of weight, but somehow it had stretched his skin over his bones and slanted his eyes. He hadn't lost his looks, but exchanged them. He looked dirty somehow, and hard, things I'd never seen in him before. His strangely sinister innocence was gone, and in its place was a more sinister knowledge. He seemed to be pacing like an impatient, dangerous, caged lion. "How goes it? What's the action like in here?" "If I told you how it was in here, you'd be sick." There was a silence. Then he continued. "I didn't have to see you. I wanted to, though. I had to make sure." "Make sure of what?" "Make sure I hated you." I suddenly remembered that time, so long ago, when Kathy looked at Mark, and for a moment, I hated him. I wondered what it felt like to experience that feeling all your life, to hate the person you loved best. Mark, I didn't know what I was doing." "Can it, buddy?" He glanced around. "Groovy place, ain't it? Seems like home now." "I hear you've been causing trouble?" "Yeah, I don't seem to be able to get away with things anymore." I thought I'd break down and cry then, but I didn't. "Listen, you straighten up, and they'll let you out early on probation, or parole, or whatever it is, and you can come home. I'll get you a job at the store." "Like hell you will," Mark said in the same easy, pleasant voice he'd used all along. "I ain't never going back there again. When I get out of here, you ain't never going to see me again. We were like brothers. You were my best friend." He laughed then, and his eyes were the golden, hard, flat eyes of a jungle animal. Like a friend once said to me, "That was then, this is now." I broke out in a sweat and was suddenly glad of the four walls and the guards and the bars. I think if he could have, Mark would have killed me. And then it ends just slightly more depressing than that, a little bit further down. Part of the reason why I like the book is it ends on that down note where it does not try to cheer you up and say, "Hey, life is happy. You make good choices, life turns out well." That's not the way life works. You make choices and sometimes life sucks, which is what leads into the stories that I offer for you guys next week. The theme of this book, That Was Then, This Is Now, is things will change a lot for you guys from here going forward into high school. I've had a lot of my high schoolers who come back and talk to me. That's where a lot of my after-school time is spent, with high schoolers who come back and talk to me after school. And I talk to them about how their life changes when it gets to high school. And I realized one of the big things I could do was talk to you guys like you were adults, because I don't think many teachers do that. So what I offered to you that last week is I'd tell you the stories of how I changed from junior high to high school, about how drugs and my past choices and how they changed and how they formed me, and how the choices you make in junior high influence you later on in life. And so those are sort of the stories that go off of this one. I wanted a bit more time, but I don't have it. Luckily, the test tomorrow won't take you very long, I don't think. And tomorrow's class period is longer, so I fully expect us to hopefully get a chance to get into some of our stories tomorrow. Fingers crossed. But we'll see. With that uplifting thinking, numbers, let's do 11 through 15.